Greetings all, Happy New Year to you. May 2021 bring you and yours good fortune and hopefully more travel, which I certainly need because it's the only way for me to get back onto more steel, because most countries that have tanks aren't even letting Americans in, let alone guys with cameras. However, until then, we are going to go back again to the virtual tours of fire control systems. It's kind of interesting to see how different ways have been reached to achieve the same end goal. You think form follows function, when the function is simply steel on target. But as you may have noticed by now, very rarely are they the same. And so we're going to continue on with the CV9040. Now we've already done the CV9030, which is as near as makes no difference to a Bradley's Bushmaster upgraded with a new vehicle and fire control system and so on. The CV9040 is a little different. Not only does it have a big feck-off cannon, but it also has a few other tweaks that it can do with the larger round and snazzier FCS. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do both the CV9040B and C, and you'll be able to see the difference in lethality that just a little single tweak to the vehicle can do to make the C so much more dangerous. By the way, these are very early models in Steel Beast's terms, and they don't have the same fidelity as you would have seen in the CV9030. Doesn't really make any difference for the sake of the content on the fire control system, but I just thought I'd give you a heads up. So, on with the show. Okay, welcome to the CV9040 Bravo model. There is a C in the background, we'll check it out a little bit later. Points to note on the outside, not that there are all that many. Note the position of the smoke grenade launchers and the coaxial machine gun. We're going to come back to that a little bit later. A typical IFV configuration with the engine deck front right, driver front left. Hatch on the back for 4 of the dismounts to stick their heads out. This variant carries 7, and of course you can put them back in. It is, as you can see, a there we go, a side opening ramp. Ignore the fact that they seem to be wearing German flags. I guess it's they're on an exchange program. Indicators, brake lights, of course, everything to make yourself fully road legal. This, believe it or not, is a ski rack. It can also be used as a ladder. There is a cooling air intake here. Now, what's a little interesting about this is that it actually cycles it around the inside of the armor a little bit as well to reduce the thermal signature. Not enough to make, if you ask me, not enough to make a full difference, but that's what it's there for. A feature you'll see in a lot of the more modern vehicles, such as this one here, on the coax to the gun, it's where you ordinarily might expect to see a coaxial sight. And indeed that's what it is, except this one is actually a black and white camera. It is not a traditional old-fashioned direct vision optics such as you'd find on an Abrams or a Bradley. It is simply an electronic camera. Up top there is a deflector for the 40mm shell casing. So if you've ever seen a 40mm anti-aircraft gun firing away, you know just how fast these 40mm cases get flung out, and about 15 to 20 meters forward. They're not small and they're not slow. Gunner's primary sight is located up here. You can see it's got a reasonable array of optics on the side. And of course the TC has its own cupola. So if you were to hop in to the TC's position, and this is again one of the older models in Steel Beast, the interior is not as high fidelity as it was on the CV9030 that we had seen a while ago. That vehicle is a little bit better modeled inside, but for the purposes of the Switchology and the fire control system, this old model will do adequately. Nice touch is the anti-slip coating around the rims and of course on the back. And there is an umbrella position for the TC, so he can just look around under the overhead protected, as we say in American. There is of course the blade slide here to help get people like your gunner, online quickly. Once inside, reasonable field of vision from the periscopes all the way around. Looking over my back left shoulder, okay, well there's the front, just to orient you. Back left shoulder, you have the 2 radio sets, a couple of rifles, folding stock, but they're full-size rifles. And various control panels, GPS for the internal navigation system. That actually has many more functions than are displayed here. This is the short and dirty version just for gameplay purposes. It gives you your grid and nothing else. Although there is in real life the option of either using navigation mode or direction mode to help you get around. And the coaxial machine gun you can see is on the left hand side. It is the responsibility of the commander to load it. Internal dome light, famous enough. Alright, so his one sight is the repeater monitor for the thermal imager. It is a monitor, obviously, being a thermal, and that's the end of it. Down underneath, you can see through the turret basket, as you go down, the individual 40mm rounds, of which there are 48 stowed underneath.
Traverse left. Traverse left. Traverse left.
They would feed, of course, into the 3 hoppers here. Each hopper is 8 rounds, giving you a total of 24 ready rounds available. Okay, if you look at the control handle, this is designed with a bit of upgrading in mind. Now you'll see the control handle is actually fixed. It's not a traditional joystick, it is a hat controller, much like on the Challenger 2. So you simply aim the gun with the commander's handle by use of the hat switch. To the left is a stop override, so basically if you're going to be futzing around in here, it's because the commander is probably going to be doing a lot of the reloading of the ammunition. You'll see both on the hull and under the turret floor there. He obviously doesn't want to get his hand caught in anything by the gunner moving. Top right, this is not currently in use. Neither is this. So these are for when you have observation capabilities with a commander's independent viewer. This is the slew button. And this is for choosing between controlling with your hat switch the CITV or whatever sight they're going to fit onto it, or the gun and turret itself. Right now all this button is used for is it just automatically slews the turret forward so that the driver can get in and out. On the far side is the trigger for the cannon. If he really wants to fire the machine gun, he simply pulls back on the trigger himself. Down below is the palm switch. On the far side you can't see it, and also on the right hand side you can just top see here is if it is equipped with a threat warning receiver, such as a laser warning receiver, you push this if the alarm goes off and it'll slew in the direction of the threat. Again, not currently installed. As we go around to the left here on the commander's panel, the front panzer, literally front armor, what it does is it locks the traverse of the turret over the front, stops you from knocking people's heads up if they have them up around the back. This is the counter, this is the override to any safety lockouts. Smoke grenade launchers left and right. This is an issue with the breach mechanism, and this is an issue with the hammer sear mechanism. If one of these lights up, your gun is not working. This is a big safety. Once you push this, everything stops moving. In order to release it, you've got to rotate it around to the right, so that's why there's an arrow up there. Spotlight, well, that's for the lighting. This is a light for something. Oh. This is a light for anything that is on safe, electrical safe. This light will come up, and of course you got a 24-volt output for either handheld lamps, heaters, things of that nature. So that's basically it for inside here. You got a little air vent at the back for creature comforts, and well, that's basically the gist of it. So over to the gunner's side. He has a lot more to play with. So you can see 3 ways of looking out, not counting the 3 periscopes on the right. The first is a extremely simple unity sight. X marks the spot. Just aim close enough, pull the trigger. That wasn't even close. Let's try the machine gun. There we go. And walk your tracer onto target. And that is now a dead bush. Alternate sights, we'll come back to these, are the day sight, and the last one is a combination sight. It's either the auxiliary sight or the thermal imager as required. So looking at some of the gadgets and gizmos, controls, well, he's got the primary control handle here, obviously enough, and manual handles for hand cranking as required. Simple enough. Control handles on the right, or control panels I should say. So he also has his big stop safety, which is again released by turn. Smoke grenade launchers left or right. This button is what allows you to toggle up here, whoops, between the infrared sight and the auxiliary sight. So you can see the difference there. The auxiliary sight, as mentioned, is the black and white camera basically tied to the outside of the gun. And of course this lets you know which one is operating, if they're powered on, powered off. Similarly, once you go down to power, craft presumably being power, power to the turret, power to the 2 sights, daylight and auxiliary, and then power to the laser. Then you come down to the safety. So this is the safety for the electrical safety. That lights up, of course, on the commander's panel I saw earlier for all the weapons, the gun, the machine gun, and the smoke dischargers. This will warm up your optics. This will defrost your optics. And this is for the wiper or washer system. And there are 3 settings depending on just how much washing you need to do. And these will give you warning symbols for the various different problems that you can have, such as testing for the gun. Oil level is low for the hydraulic fluid in the turret. There is again the breech block, the hammer down here. And this is the safety light that gets turned on the gunner's side should he turn this on. This panel further forward, this is your control panel for the infrared imager up top. So magnification, big, easy to hit in a hurry toggle with a focus knob. You can go white hot or black hot. This will be your sensitivity, and this will be the size of your monitor. Brightness of your reticle. Then we have aiming, basically zeroing up, down, left, right. This is your power, off or on. Indicator switch, so that lets you know whether or not you have power coming through and whether or not it's sufficiently chilled and active. And further down you got brightness and contrast as you would expect. And then these are various modes for the infrared monitor. Not modeled, not quite sure what they do. All I can tell you is that one of them is zeroing. So then you move forward to the fire control computer itself. These are adjustment displays for lights. The laser mode setting is either for combat or exercise. So if you flipped it down, the light would go on for you're in exercise mode. The brightness knob for your display panel. The number in here is adjusted by use of this knob. So right now it is set for manual ALFs, ALFs being range, I don't know how you pronounce it in Swedish, but the default battle sight range for this system is 1200 meters, pretty common with a lot of weapons actually. And you can select a whole series of different things. You got air temperature, you got ammunition temperature, you got the ammunition type for the ammunition that you're loading into the computer, the speed, wind direction, wind speed, all the various different things that you would ordinarily manually input if you had to. And finally down below are the fire control system modes. So normal obviously is where you want to have it most of the time. And these are the reserve or emergency mode switches. Oh, by the way, this is the save button for whatever it is that you enter into the system. And the sight modes down here, 9 positions again, and testing, zeroing, and then the 3 different types of emergency mode fusing. This particular type retains the laser rangefinder or ballistic computer, and when you get down here you're going to basically fixed range, fixed ballistic computers, no assistance to your aiming at all. And then you can get to the control handle itself, which unlike the commander's control handle actually does move around in a manner that you would expect: forwards, backwards, left or right. Buttons on the, I'm not sure if we can actually get to see them, but on the front under here are your 2 triggers. On the left hand side is for the coaxial machine gun, on the right hand side is for the 40mm cannon. ALFs again is the range finder, laser range finder, and Echo is the return that you would be using. Now it's not just for the return, it's also how you would input the manual mode or the battle sight mode that you just put in. FAC 1, 2 or 3 are your 3 8-round magazines in the hopper, so you can have up to 3 different types of round ready to go. ATG is the fire control mode. By default you are in ground target mode. Press it once, you go into air target mode. Let go the palm switches. Press it again, you go into silent observation mode. And I'll come back, here's the palm switch of course on the 2 sides. I'll come back to that in a little bit. Finally, on the right hand side is the button for the programmable proximity fuses. And in the B model there's basically only a couple of settings. Things get much more interesting when you move to the C model. If I come back out, I look down, you can see what appears to be a manual trigger, a foot trigger, a turret lock, I suspect an elevation lock, but that's me just hypothesizing, and more power settings for video, air vents, and I presume this is for opening his hatch. Kind of low tech, but whatever works. So that done, let's see if we can actually do some shooting, and we'll show you how the fire control system works in practice. Alright, so I'm going to start off with the daylight sight. Your main point of aim is this little circle here. That's for the gun and for the laser. This is the point of aim for battle sight with AP rounds, with fin stabilized AP. And you will see these are all 200 meter increments for the HE round. They are, you'll see that they're kind of curved at the top. This is actually fairly common even back in World War II because of the spin stabilization. It does actually have a bit of an effect on range. And down at the bottom, this is for air targets. I'm going to ignore it. This choke sight is actually an air target choke sight. It is not a choke sight for PCs such as you would find on the Bradley. And again, these are in mils. I would need to look up, but I think these are 5 mils and 10, but basically used for estimating range. Maybe I'll put up a little thing here. So, firstly, you'll notice at the bottom not very much happens until I push the laser button. then all of a sudden a range appears at the bottom left. Now, as I scan around, if you look at the bottom right corner of the screen, you'll see the computer game has given me a turret clock indicator, because you have fewer indicators in the game than you do in real life. But as I traverse left, you'll see a dot has just appeared next to the range. As I traverse further left, you will see a second dot appears, and then a third dot, until you get over the back half, when suddenly you're looking at all 4 dots open up. And then when 4 dots open up on both sides, you're literally over the back end. So 4 dots is basically 90 degrees. So let's keep going around. Suddenly we're down to 3 dots at the 3 o'clock position. 2 dots, oddly enough, about 2 o'clock. 1 dot a little bit beyond 1, and then no dots. And you're aiming direct forward again. Now, the next thing you'll notice as I drive forward is that the gun, or at least the sight, is not stabilized. It is a really big gun. You have to, I guess back then you had to make some compromises somewhere. But you see that little light at the bottom that says little green light, which is flashing and now is steady? It is a calculating or a caution light. So once you have traveled more than 200 meters, the little light lights up to let you know you've come more than 200 meters, your ballistic solution may no longer be accurate. And as I laze again, you'll see that it'll be less than 800 meters now. Similarly, if you are tracking a target and it puts lead on it, this may take a while because it's not a fast vehicle here. But I laze 680. You'll see that this is a dual axis stabilized sight, so there's no jumping around at the reticle like there is in the M1. And if I follow this for long enough, it should calculate that the target has moved more than a few hundred meters. And again, that little light should light up saying, hey, you might want to consider relazing because your fire control solution may no longer be accurate. It's going to take forever at this rate. Well, tell you what, while it's doing that, let's dump lead. F1 is, by the way, is the flash that says you're in ground mode. Now, let's say I let go of the palm switch and I hit the mode button. I am in F3, which is in silent observation mode. And what this does is you'll see I am traversing, but there's no sound of the turret. Silent observation mode gives me 15 degrees of traverse in each direction, plus about 30 degrees of elevation to observe without moving my turret, because of course nothing catches the eye like something which is moving. So externally you don't see anything at all unless you got really, really good optics and you're looking right at the periscope, and you'll be able to see the internal mirror head is moving left and right. It's not a huge field of vision, 15 degrees each way, but it's enough to get you going. And then you hold on to the palm switches, the mode deactivates, and away you go. So SL slipperage, whatever, that is your standard default armored piercing fin stabilized round. Again, so we're talking 40mm AP rounds here. So let's laze one more time, 800 yards or meters. First round just cycles into the chamber. Second round goes away. Now, AP rounds can only be fired in semi-auto mode. But as you can see, there's nothing to it. Now, let's say I wanted to find a moving target, and we were to, oh, by the way, that smoke dust is from the sable petals. So let's fire on a moving target. You track. Okay, slowing. Laze, continue to track, fire around, and you can see it applies excess lead. Now the other thing you'll see, of course, is that sometimes you just go right through. Is that an infantryman? So let's see what happens if I switch ammo type. And this is HE contact. There is a third ammo type in here, which is a proximity. So regular HE tracer was the second one. This Coles GR90 is high explosive pre-fragmented with a proximity fuse. There is some infantry over there. Okay, let's try proximity fuse. Yeah, hit the ground. No, I didn't even close. Oh, proximity against a tree. So there you go. And there is, those are your two options, are impact and proximity. Now this does have a rate of fire option because it is not an AP. Now the problem, of course, is I just fired 4 of the 8 rounds. So I need to reload back up to 8 rounds. And while I'm at it, I shall also reload the regular HE rounds. There's no point in shooting proximity at troops. There we go. So I'll go back to the AP. Oh. Like the Bradley, the next round fired is going to be proximity. And then you go to the ammunition type that was selected. So I am in low rate of fire. Let me give myself one more round in here. There are 2 salvo lengths you can choose. One salvo length is 8 rounds, the other salvo length is 4. That's this little switch I forgot to talk about here. So I now should have a 4-round burst on the way. Should have a 4-round burst. Oh, okay, let's try this again. Okay, so now I should have a 4-round burst on the way. That first round was an AP round, which is why I fired 5. But that shows you the rate of fire of this system. Now, of course, the catch is I've just fired off in one burst. I fired off half of my ammunition. Now, multiple returns are a thing as mentioned. It stores in the system. So let's say I aim a little bit off here. You now see I have 2 returns stored. The one on the bottom left is the one which is actually going to be used. The one on the bottom right is stored and can be selected by use of the echo button or the return button. Press it once and it shifts all the 3 ranges that are in the system one to the left. So now the last return is the one used by the fire control system, and the range which is on deck, for lack of a better term, is the battle site range or the manually entered range that was done on the computer. And we go back to the regular one here. So lays, 4-round burst. And as you can see, that didn't do them any favors whatsoever. Again, you can, in theory, use proximity. Alright, let's see what happens. Let's get rid of the contact fuse. That is why the manual says do not use proximity fusing on ground targets, because the ground will set off the proximity. What you can use the proximity fuse on, though, instead, are aircraft, which brings us to aviation mode. But before I do that, I'm going to go over to the thermal imager, just so you can see the system here. Now all the buttons, all these little lights remain. So instead of a green light for calc ready that goes on or off, it's actually written there. Your target mode, instead of saying F1, F2, F3, it'll give you in written stationary target, air target, or silent observation on the bottom right there now. And of course your ammunition type selected, your field of view, and your polarity. Otherwise the reticle is absolutely identical to the daylight sight. Now should things start going wrong and you do want to go back to the daylight sight and you're using battle sight mode, so go back to AP. All you have to do with battle sight mode is, let me find the target first. There he is. Well, again, it works just as well with the two different types. So that was proximity, that was in the tube. Aim a little bit ahead, use the battle sight. Let's try the right round. And you can see these 40mm rounds are just going right through, even to the point that folks are getting out. Now, should that fail miserably, your next choice again is the black and white television. So let's turn on the reserve sight, whichever button that was. There we go. Go back up to the monitor, and you can see that this is an extremely simple sight. It's got the battle sight for AP with lead markers for 20 and 40 kilometers an hour. It has the range markers for HE, again with lead markers for 20 and 40 kilometers an hour. And that is it. So you just place it on the battle sight with your little television camera, fire the round, and I've gone high. There is a last round feature. If you shoot all rounds off entirely, it does take a little bit longer to load instead of just dropping the next rounds down the tube on top. But you saw how quickly I was going through the ammunition. I would have fired a ridiculous amount of the ready ammunition. So this 40mm, you really have to be kind of careful what you're shooting it on, so you don't find yourself out of ammunition at a very unfortunate time. The CV9040B will carry the 24 rounds in the tube, 48 in the turret basket as mentioned, and an additional 160 or so are in the hull. So let me go back to the thermal. So it should be noted that for whatever reason they decided not to place the coaxial machine gun in the fire control system. You got to walk your rounds onto target. Oh, by the way, the other reason for this curve, not only for the twist, it's also because of the parallax effect between the sight and the gun. But with the coaxial machine gun, all you can do is place one of the two ellipsis markers on the target if you think it's close or long, fire a round, or a burst, and see what happens. So obviously these guys are way too far. At this sort of range, you may as well just use the 40mm. Now this range might be a little more like it. So again, walk onto the target. So the 40mm Bofors is originally being an anti-aircraft cannon. You can imagine that it's actually pretty effective against things like helicopters. If the helicopter is being cooperative and stationary, just use regular fire control mode, lays, send around downrange. Of course, it's a hind. It might take more than one round to kill. Really? There we go.
Chopper. Fire.
And again, stationary target. Well, it's better from the front. You see, I've already just used up most of a magazine of ammunition. Now, when you run air mode, however, it does something a little bit different. It does two things differently. Firstly, it requires that you lace twice. Presumably, it did null out some error because that's pretty significant at airplane speeds. And secondly, as long as you're holding the trigger,
Fire.
it will continue to aim the gun for you. So let's try this. Air mode. First lace, second lace. And that was my 4-round burst. Let's try this again.
Fire.
Don't bleed. Air mode. First lace. Second lace. Now note what happened there is that the proximity fuse, it doesn't need a tail rotor, the proximity fuse set off against the trees. There is a solution for this, but it's not available to the B model. Which brings us to the C. So this is the CV90 Charlie model with lots of new internal gubbins and a few external ones as well. Externally, you'll see that there is additional armor both on the bow, the glasses, and on the turret side. So you can see how thick it is compared to the armor where it's just equal to the gunner's cupola or gunner's vision slit, versus here you can see there's an extra good couple of inches of presumably spaced armor. You'll also see that as a result, the smoke grenade launchers have been moved up to the roof. And most interestingly, the coaxial machine gun is now technically no longer coaxial because it rotates around a different axis, but it still performs the same general function of being aimed together with the gun. That's the external. Now internally, it has a couple of other bits and bobs as well, which affect internal abilities. So there's actually now only 6 people in the back of this instead of 7 in the back of the B model. Also, you lose about 100 rounds of 40mm, which is almost half of your ammunition capacity. So it's not insignificant. To reload the coaxial machine gun, if the belt runs dry, he's got to get out and actually do his immediate actions outside the turret. Inside, you will notice a new battlefield management system, keyboard and all. They've obviously moved the plugger down a little bit. Now, where the money has really gone, though, is not really visible from here, but it's actually behind this button, the fusing button. And we have a couple of extra tricks up the sleeve of this particular round. It's called the 3P round. It's a programmable fuse ammunition that can be set to a number of different settings before being fired. So, for example, if you fire in the conventional contact fuse or impact fuse, fire around. Okay, you do well enough. Fire over here. Short. But if they're in trenches, not quite so obvious here, you can do something perhaps a little sneaky, like a timed fuse. So lace your target, let's say it's here, and it should detonate about 5 meters above your point of aim. Previous round. Or not. You generally want to aim a little high because unless you deliberately select last return, if you do get multiple returns, you are going to end up falling short. So aim a little high, lace to the nearest target. And for issues like this, where the troops are maybe in a trench or behind a wall or something like that, that you're not sure the delayed impact is going to do, a neat trick is the time spread. So we'll fire a 4-round salvo each round is going to detonate above the target at a slightly different distance. So if your laser is a couple of meters wrong one way or the other, one of the 4 rounds that detonates should do the job. And you saw that airburst nailed this guy over here as well. And to do it again, so let's hop over here, we'll look for more targets. That looks pretty likely to me. I'll take the short one, 4 round burst. And that's him nailed. His buddy doesn't look any healthier either. So that was 2 4 round bursts though, and that used up 8 rounds. That would be one of the entire column or magazines, for lack of a better term, clips I guess, that would have been used. So you can see how very quickly you can run out of ammunition in this vehicle. Now it does have a few other tricks up its sleeve. Well, and just to be clear, these are the fuse settings, contact, impact, and delayed impact that are available in the different emergency mode settings for the HE. Anyway, so let us go back to the clever tricks that this new ammunition can do. So let's say there are troops in a building. Ordinarily, you would fire a HE round at the building, and you fire a couple of them and eventually go through the building, knock them down. I mean, this is a wooden building, shouldn't be up to much, but if there was brick, for example, I don't want to shoot at the chopper right now, thank you. If there is brick or whatever, send a round down range, and you can see it'll detonate on the outside of the house. Well, that's all very well. I mean, eventually you're going to punch through. Again, go to delayed impact. Okay, fine, I'll shoot delayed impact at the damn chopper, just to make you happy.
Target.
It's a pretty tough chopper.
Target.
Right.
Chopper. Fire.
Really, another one? Yeah, not so much armor on the side, do you? So again, that would have detonated within the fuselage of the helicopter. And exactly the same thing will happen in the house. Aim at the house, delayed impact, and it will detonate inside the house.
Big fire.
Making life much more miserable for everybody on the inside of the building. So let me reload again. Now remember, there are even more fun tricks that you can do with this programmable round. So again, we have an aircraft way over yonder. You can do the time spread, but you will recall, he'll do.
Fire.
When I was engaging the hind earlier, the proximity rounds fused on the trees instead of on the chopper. So for example, if I was to fire a proximity round here at that range, you'll see it'll detonate against the tree. So the trick is called gated proximity. So you get your lays on the target. Let's go to air target. Actually, for the sake of the demonstration, I'll wait for him to come back the other way. But what a gated proximity does is it puts a time fuse on the proximity fuse. It does not arm until a certain distance has been sent down range. So the round will not be set off by anything not in the expected proximity of the target. Okay, I'm waiting for, okay, here we go. One lays.
Fire.
So you saw how they went, the rounds would have been set off by the tree, but they were not. So that is a neat trick. If that's not enough, there's also delayed gated proximity. And what that does is once the proximity fuse is armed after traveling a certain distance, if you're shooting at something particularly large, such as a C-130 or maybe a very large rotary wing aircraft, it puts a delay on the detonation so that it gets closer to the target's fuselage instead of being set off by a rotor tip or a wing tip. 1, 2,
Fire.
I'm firing the right kind of ammo here.
Target. Chopper. Fire.
And I've got 1 round left. Plus 1 in the tube, but I don't want to take the time to spin it up. Oh well. We'll survive. So those are the neat tricks that this can do. So again, it's impact, time spread. Where's that going?
Target. Ceasefire.
Whatever.
Chopper. Fire. Chopper. Fire. Fire.
Where did he survive that?
Fire. Chopper. Fire.
So again, to recap, you have timed just for distance. Delayed impact for buildings, harder targets. Impact fuse for general purpose work. Time spread for if you really want to make sure you nail somebody in defilade or in cover. But again, bear in mind that 2 salvos is all you get before you run out of ammo. Gated proximity for shooting through bushes or anything else that might set off your proximity fuse. Also means then that you have a chance of using it against ground targets, but still not recommended. There's no point either because you have timed fuse. And well, that's about it. So that was it. I've mentioned before that modern fusing can make a very significant difference in the lethality of a vehicle, and how the move to larger ammunition does allow for the possibility of A, technically implementing a fuse that you couldn't fit into something much smaller, and B, being a little bit more cost effective because each fuse is not cheap. And of course also though, the downside is the larger the rounds that you're carrying, the fewer of them you have. So you've got to make sure that they count in the first place. Again, if you are a crewman of any of the other vehicles, Leopard 1, Leopard 2, I got a couple of guys answering that, but more is always better. T-72, Austrian, Pizarro. Well, you look it up, you see what's in Steel Beast, and if you think you can help me out with some of the tips and tricks of the vehicle, then I will greatly appreciate it. All right, well, I will see you on the next one, and I hope you found it interesting and informative. I hope you liked the little switch there, just to add a bit of variety.